focus of what we're going to do in this next little bit is this article by Beverly Chin that talks about the kinds of principles that we need to be thinking about in writing instruction in order to meet the Common Core for our students. So what we're going to have you do, and if you have your Common Core booklets and your Anchor Standards, great. If you don't, we're bringing copies of those around as well. What we're going to do is think about what argument Chin is making in her essay. And you're going to have some time to read through that. You can mark it up, it's yours to keep. I can send you an electronic copy of that as well. And then there's a note catcher that goes with it that asks you to identify from the Anchor Standards. This is kind of twofold. We're going to be digging into what we need to think about as writing instructors, but we also kind of need to revisit those Anchor Standards and get ourselves familiarized with those. So the principles that she outlines are on the note catcher. You can read through the article and kind of look at her thinking. And then what I would like you to do is provide some evidence. So what standards are informing that principle that she has created? So this first one says teaching writing as a recursive, flexible decision-making process. That's what we should be doing with our students. So when I look through the Anchor Standards, under writing standards, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 are most definitely influencing that principle that she's created. And under the language standards, number 3. Then explanation is what makes you say so. And the note catcher set up this way is really helpful for kids too, so they can organize their thinking when it comes to developing arguments. And then explaining what makes you say so. How does the standard you listed relate to this principle? Students must identify a task, audience, purpose, and that will change as will their decisions. Valid reasoning, relevant, sufficient evidence, and well-chosen details all involve students making decisions. So she sees this as a process we have to teach kids where we can be flexible and we have to be able to let them make decisions. So the standards that you see informing that from the Anchor Standards which are coming around, just jot the numbers in there. And then what's the explanation? How do you see those connected to each other? Okay. And it is a little heavier work we're going to jump into, and then we'll take a break when we're finished. And I forgot to mention, sorry, if you see something she's missing, write that down. If there's another principle that she's not addressing that we really should be thinking about in our writing instruction to meet the Common Core, put that in the note catcher in the blank. There's 2 blanks for new principles. Put it in. Even if you're not done, it's okay. You've got through enough of the article that you can kind of have a debrief about what you noticed. And the last 2 boxes that were on the note catcher, so we didn't have us talking about those. What do you think Chin has missed is what we wanted to put in those 2. Like, what other things do you think we should take into consideration when we're implementing Common Core as far as writing goes? And a couple that have come to my mind are, 1, we probably should really be using the language of the standards. So task, purpose, audience, opinion is what argument is up until 6th grade. So using that language, that terminology for kids, I think is an important one that I might add. Another one that I would probably add, and we'll see this a little bit later, is not to teach the text types in isolation, because I think writers draw from all 3 in several different ways, and we'll talk a little bit more about that after the break. So just kind of be thinking about, is there anything you think she missed during the break? And then we'll come back at 10:30 and talk about it. The thing I wanted to talk about was, as you were reading, are there any other things that you think that Chin kind of missed when it comes to writing instructions to the Common Core that we should articulate as a new principle? It's a big question. Yes.
Using technology to produce, publish, and collaborate.
Okay. Did you have time to talk about what standards?
Under writing, I thought maybe standards 6, 8, and possibly 10.
Any others?
Well, on number 10, I mean, she kind of talked about it, but I went over and over it about those extended time and then shorter time frame. So that was the writing number 10, which is a little bit different than the multiple and digital sources.
Okay, so you're thinking we need to say something about
That it
time?
needs to become routine and extended period of time and shorter period of time. So it's just part of what you do every day. And that was 10 on writing.
Okay. Anybody else?
I didn't see that she covered much on evaluating information, that, gathering and evaluating information.
How do we articulate that as a principal part? Validating evidence. Evaluating evidence in their writing?
Well, or even deciding what evidence to use based on evaluating it ahead of time.
Doesn't everybody add that to the
Yeah, it would be standard number 8 and 9.
So that's one of those decisions.
Could be a decision.
Any others? How did you feel about the idea of the language? Should we all be using task, purpose, audience? Is that limiting? That one comes up a lot.
What was the argument against this?
They'll go to college and some of them will call it a controlling statement instead of a thesis, or we have to expose kids to all different terminology they may encounter for something. The vocabulary challenge. Well, it seems to cycle around, right? Yeah. I remember, when I was done, it was always thesis, and then all of a sudden controlling statement. So your kids, what is it? Right? And then sometimes I think we use so many different terms that they're not clear on what the definition is of those things. So that's something I think we should take into consideration. What about teaching the text types in isolation?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, I'm going to create, because I have these common core standards, I'm going to have a narrative unit, and then an argument unit, and then an informational explanatory text unit. You think it's wise a couple?
At first, I'm thinking big on the one that's necessary.
Okay.
If they don't understand the difference between those three terms, there's no way you can learn them in integrate. That's why we teach them in isolation first and then weave them together. I mean,
Okay.
I would agree with her because I've shown my kids just introductory paragraphs that included narrative and an argument statement, and because that narrative really lost so much, they didn't identify
Okay.
it as a piece.
Yeah. I think teaching using the different types is absolutely great, but the way that my curriculum is structured, trimester 1 is narrative, trimester 2 is informational, and then opinion. And they don't get enough practice if they don't, if you're not teaching them all the time. So it was a struggle to get through that last opinion unit because they had not had the practice of going and trying to find the different arguments and something that would back up their evidence. They've done a little bit, but it's that, I don't know what we did at the very beginning, that might tell you that, the giving them the practice, the proposing the practice. Okay.
I'm on the curriculum team for certain voice schools, and we've been working on the English 7 curriculum. And one of the things that was trying to move away from is putting it in a box where semester 1 is, narrative, and because what happens is you end up getting to third quarter and you're doing research, and you do this huge, giant, scary, intimidating research project, and you don't really do research another time per year. And I feel like the relationship between narrative and informational and research is so important. And I feel like it's more important than having a student be able to look backwards expositor. That's helpful for them to do so that we can have a conversation about the text. But I feel like sometimes that with our tests, we end up having that be the be all and end all. Is identifying that, but it's really more important to see the relationship between writing.
Well, that kind of leads us right into what we're going to do next.